are a bunch of sickos. The Caesars were bad, the Claudians were worse. And then Nero gets grafted onto them. Which is why, you see, this is the background against which Christianity has to be looked at. This is the power structure of the world. If you're looking at Roman governors who are wiping their hands of problems in Palestine, don't you believe it? And this is just propaganda. This did not happen. These people are monsters, and the main thing they're worried about is civil unrest and subversive events, activities. And they kept very careful records too. And we're going to see, this is going to tell us that the records of Pontius Pilate's governors that don't agree with the gospel portrait. And so he gets very angry about this and wants these records. He says they're forgeries. They couldn't, but there probably were actual chancellery records. They were called the Acti Pilati. Again, I'm getting a lot of scattered material, but slowly, hopefully, it'll all come in a couple of, like 4 or 5 weeks. It'll slowly come together as a picture in your mind, because you know, you can come from any direction, and you can come into the center. Just have to accumulate knowledge like a snowball, okay? Basically, that's the way to do it. Just think of a snowball gathering snow as you go downhill. It doesn't all have to be straight line relationship. When you go to sleep at night, your brain will sort out the relationships. The data is cataloged like on the internet in your brain, and then slowly all the connections occur while you're sleeping. Your brain is putting it all together in a fairly rational, hopefully, if you got any brain, unified way, without you having to do anything. It just sorts it all out like a sorting machine. In any event, the Acti Pilati is something that Eusebius will tell us about that appeared in his time, and it was supposed to be the Roman chancellery records of Pilate's. Acti means the Acts. Just like our book of Acts are the Acts of the Apostles. The Acts of Pilati. By the way, our book of Acts is not the Acts of the Apostles, because there's hardly any apostles that do anything in it. That's just a name that it's really the Acts of Paul, and a smattering of Peter thrown in. It should be the Acts of Paul, because from about the time Paul introduced till the end, it's just about Paul. So there's no other apostles. In fact, if you ask me what the other 10 apostles did from reading Acts, there's no way to know. There's no information. Now that right from the start, that, I can see some of your faces are even like, what? Puzzles believers. Why does it puzzle believers? I mean, I'm a critical person, so you're going to get criticism from me, whatever happens. I apologize, but I told you that. But why does it puzzle believers? Because they haven't read the documents themselves all. They don't know what's in the documents. They assume that because it's called the Acts of the Apostles, that it must be about the Acts of the Apostles. Until they read it themselves and find out that it's not about the Acts of the Apostles at all. And in principle, people are left out. Probably purposefully. But you see, you as just a starting, who approach this thing just from a practicing standpoint, for the good feeling it will provide and the spiritual reinforcement and the communal solidarity that it gives, like Christian house painter looking for a job, looking for a good Christian employer or something like that. The solidarity of feeling as part of a cultural group that you can trust is more important to you than anything about how accurate any data is within the documentary heritage that you've been heir to. So right from the start, almost nobody knows that the Acts of the Apostles is not about the apostles. In fact, well, it is about one, but he wasn't even an apostle. For instance, if I were to give you the other 12 apostles, who are just mentioned in passing at the beginning, I think 10 out of the 12 are never followed in any way at all. The only two that are really mentioned seriously are Thomas and Peter. James, the Apostle James, is mentioned just to get his head lopped off, so that we can make room for the other James who's never even introduced. Because the moment James gets killed, I think it's chapter 10 of Acts, the other James appears, the brother of Jesus, who it turns out also seems to have been an apostle, but we weren't told that. And the people writing it don't want, I think, us to know that. We have to go to Paul to find out that he was an apostle. How do we know from Paul that he was an apostle? This is what we're going to do in this class. Because in Galatians, Paul says, "And I went to Jerusalem, and I was not known by sight among the churches of Christ in Judea. And of all the apostles, I only saw two, Peter and James, the brother of the Lord." So when Paul says, "Of all the apostles, I only met two, Peter and James, the brother of the Lord," he implies that James, the brother of the Lord, was an apostle. That's how you can start your study to try to see how the information gels, doesn't gel, develops or doesn't develop, or what you can say about these people. Because Acts doesn't even tell us who James, brother of the Lord, is. Suddenly he appears and he's there, but it doesn't even tell us who he is. So these are difficult things that we'll get, but I don't mean to, I'm talking about Acts. So acti in Latin is the records of a given administration. In the governorships, it's the records of the different governors. And the Romans were very careful about keeping records. And in the case of Acts, it would be the record of the apostles. That's what it really means. The works, the acts, the deeds, the records of the given apostle. Anyway, to go back here to Cleopatra. Yeah, I got back. Usually I saw myself off, but I got back. We got into all this by telling you who Cleopatra was, who Caesar was, who the emperors were, their depraved behavior, the different, why the Romans wanted to plug into Cleopatra. Why they want to plug into her? She was the last representative of the conquest of Alexander the Great. And therefore, if Caesar could connect up with her, he inherits the whole tradition of Alexander, plus he makes his family line fairly royal in a way that it wasn't previously, and he combines the whole heritage of Alexander with his own. How did this go down in Rome? Resented it. They didn't want it, they didn't want her, and this was looked upon very negatively, which one of the, because they smelt a coming empire here, which is one of the factors that probably led to his assassination. This liaison